11 hours ago, Jordan Peterson resigned from full professorship at the University of Toronto, which I guess is some sort of universal correction because having watched the guy speak, I never got the impression he should really be teaching anyone anything. But he wrote this big old, every big media figure who does a resignation, they always like type out the manifesto about why they're leaving all the time, always. And I haven't read it though. I've seen a couple of screen caps, and I know how wordy he can be. The full thing is probably like 20 pages long, or is this the full thing? Hold on. I think this is the full thing right here. Oh, okay, this isn't too bad. All right, here. From the National Post, let's go over it. I've seen exactly one sentence, and I'm already ready to call him racist. So, that's good. Jordan Peterson, why I am no longer a tenured professor at the University of Toronto. From Jordan Peterson, special to National Post. It's the same Jordan Peterson. It's not a coincidence. I recently resigned from my position as full tenured professor at the University of Toronto. I am now Professor Emeritus, and before I turned 60. Emeritus is generally a designation reserved for superannuated faculty, albeit those who have served their term with some distinction. I had envisioned teaching and researching at the University of Toronto full-time until they had to haul my skeleton out of my office. I loved my job. And wait, he's not 60 yet. Wait, really? Wow. Falling apart. I mean, I guess the drugs and everything. I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, he liked his job. Blah blah blah. But the career path was not meant to be. Here are the reasons why. So let's get to it. First, my qualified and supremely trained heterosexual white male graduate students, and I've had many others, by the way, face a negligible chance of being offered university research positions despite stellar scientific dossiers. This is partly because of diversity, inclusion, and equity mandates, my preferred acronym, DIE. You get it? See? Because DIE, very smart. PhD material. These have been imposed universally in academia, despite the fact that university hiring committees have already done everything reasonable for all the years of my career, and then some to ensure that no qualified minority candidates were ever overlooked. My students are also partly unacceptable precisely because they are my students. I am academic persona non grata because of my unacceptable philosophical positions. And this isn't just some inconvenience. These facts rendered my job morally untenable, so on and so forth. So, just to be forthcoming, Jordan Peterson hit the national spotlight by lying about Bill C-16. I think it's reasonable, given the fact that his career was propelled by him lying about and overstating the proposed harm of so-called diversity, inclusion, and equity-based laws. It's reasonable to assume that he will lie in general about them. He didn't just lie about it once, of course. He made a career out of lying about it. All the time, constantly. What was the lie? He was talking about the Bill C-16 as though it was government-enforced speech, as though police were going to become seizing people in the night. It is not true. Nobody is in jail for it. He lied about it. He massively overstated the threat that it posed. There was no threat that it posed. Bill C-16 was a simple expansion of an existing Canadian legal structure. Very simple, same as the protected classes we have here in the United States. No one is harmed by it. People are helped by it. He lied about it. He continues to lie about it. There's no getting around that. So here he is continuing to lie. The idea that heterosexual white male anything are unable to make it forward in life because of diversity programs is an oft-touted conservative position for which I have yet to see any evidence. Seriously, for all the bitching and moaning about affirmative action, which has been taking place since like the 1970s or whatever, the actual evidence of this meaningfully disadvantaging people of privileged demographic statuses is lacking, to say the very least. It just has not been thrown out there. But they will say this about anything. Anytime a conservative sees a white person not get a job, they'll be like, oh, I bet it's because a black person got it, because of diversity programs. The assumption that anytime a white person is superseded by a non-white person or anything of that kind is one fueled by racism. The assumption that because a black person is there, it must be because of diversity programs and not because, they earned it. Now, it is possible that there are some like specific programs that do prioritize like stuff in some elements. You could even have, for example, like a diversity program that does prioritize members of minority groups, and I think there are good arguments to do that. By the way, good utilitarian, fair-minded ones. But even without getting into the details, even if those things were to be like put forward, the overstatement being used here is, I mean, the nicest term that I could use, I guess, would be unworthy of academia. Seriously, my qualified and supremely trained heterosexual white male graduate students face a negligible chance of being offered university research positions despite stellar scientific dossiers. Really? Heterosexual? Are they doing diversity hires based on your sexuality now? That's new to me. This is presenting a narrative. This is a narrative. This is a story that is being put forward. This is not a reflection of an actual existing measurable trend that he's noticed. Yeah, the group that benefits most from affirmative action historically is white women. That's like the group that that benefits the most often from it. Anyway, then he complains about how his students are unacceptable partly because they are Jordan Peterson students. I'd love to see any evidence of that. Second reason, this is one of many issues of appalling ideology currently demolishing the universities and downstream the general culture. Do you notice how people who are really concerned with the demolition of universities don't ever seem to care about like rising tuition costs? Or like the fact that universities are like way more invested in making money off the land they own or their sports teams than they are in providing a good education, or the fact that they consistently underinvest in like education or don't have like enough teachers or like well-trained people. It's always the minorities, right? I mean, it's interesting, it's the same as conservatives. They care very much about the downfall of America, but like not in terms of infrastructure spending or like healthcare or like any kind of like social mobility or like all the metrics by which you analyze the health of a country. They couldn't give a shit about. But immigration, now the destruction of our country is nigh, and they're very concerned about it too. It's interesting. Not the least because there is simply not enough qualified BIPOC people in the pipeline to meet diversity targets quickly enough. BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and People of Color, for those of you not in the knowing woke. I appreciate him using this term just so that he can chastise people for the existence of this term, Like, this is like when conservatives do type out like LGBTQIAA plus QRET, even though nobody actually uses that in real life, so they can pretend that every like queer person uses those terms or whatever. This has been common knowledge among any remotely truthful academic. Okay. So this hasn't been common knowledge midst academics, or I imagine in any discernible or provable data. But the truthful academics, I see. I wonder if his definition of truthful is people who agree with me. Who has served on a hiring committee for the last 3 decades. This means we're out to produce a generation of researchers utterly unqualified for the job. Ooh, okay, here we go. So this is another explicitly racist narrative. Forced diversity is causing unqualified minorities to graduate with insufficient training. This is the logic that people use when they say, like, affirmative action will mean you'll have a bunch of black doctors who don't know how to hold a scalpel properly. Again, really not an issue that, to my knowledge, has been borne out in any kind of meaningful data. As I understand it, if you can't cut it in these fields, you drop out. As I understand it, the problem is that in school systems that have affirmative action or that have a lot of like kind of compelled minority inclusion, those minority groups have a higher dropout rate, which would be expected because they're being put through disproportionately, right? But that doesn't mean that the ones who do make it through the school are, on average, going to be less capable than the white people who do, But this fear-mongering of unqualified minority graduates is legitimately like decades-old racist propaganda. And it's, it's not good. And we've seen what that means already in the horrible grievance studies disciplines. I'm not sure what he means here. Grievance studies? Disciplines? What are we... Oh. This is the thing James Lindsay was a part of when they submitted some bad research to humanities-related fields and it got published. That doesn't have anything... Wait, so he's saying right here that the one time that like bogus research was put through and published by humanities, that's because of researchers unqualified for the job, and that's because those researchers were minorities that were forced through because of affirmative action. Do you guys understand the reach that's being done here? This guy pretends to be an academic. These are very tenuous threads that are being tied together because it serves a political narrative. This is not like a cohesive, evidence-based argument. That combined with the death of objective testing. Okay. Very, very academic language, too. Not at all like reads like a post-millennial, think piece. Has compromised the university so badly it can hardly be overstated. Or stated at all, because no evidence is being provided. And what happens in the universities eventually colors everything, as we have discovered. All my craven colleagues must craft die statements, very nice, to obtain a research grant. They all lie, excepting the minority of true believers, and they teach their students to do the same. Wow, there are so many things in here that just read like a racist propaganda. The idea that everyone secretly agrees with the racist, except for a very small minority of the truly deluded, is a really common talking point. The silent majority thing, The idea like, oh, everyone agrees with me, All the reasonable people agree with me, Only a very small number of dedicated, devout followers don't. And they do it constantly with various rationalizations and justifications, further corrupting what is already a stunningly corrupt enterprise. Some of my colleagues even allow themselves to undergo so-called anti-bias training conducted by supremely unqualified human resources personnel, lecturing inanely and blithely and in an accusatory manner about theoretically all-pervasive racist, sexist, heterosexist attitudes. Such training is now often a precondition to occupy a faculty position on a hiring committee. Yes, I do think that anti-bias training should be required for people on a university hiring committee. That seems fine to me. Even with all the descriptive dress-up he's engaging in here, if you strip away all the adjectives he's throwing out there to make this seem scary, yeah, I'm okay with that. Need I point out that implicit attitudes cannot, by the definitions generated by those who have made them a center point of our culture, be transformed by short-term explicit training? That is true. Implicit bias can't be corrected just with short-term training. Assuming that those biases exist in the manner claimed, and that is a very weak claim. I like that. A very weak claim that implicit bias might exist. This guy's supposed to be a psychology professor, isn't he? Assuming the woke left is correct in their tenuous assertion that the concept of implicit bias exists. Oh, just that like universal thing that everyone knows exists, like completely uncontroversially in all fields. Yeah. And I'm speaking scientifically here when he says it's a very weak claim. He says, speaking unscientifically. The implicit association test, the much vaunted IAT, which purports to objectively diagnose implicit bias, that's automatic racism and the like, is by no means powerful enough, valid, and reliable enough to do what it purports to do. Is that what it purports to do? Harvard Implicit Association Test. Let me see. In the book Blind Spot, the authors reveal hidden biases based on their experience with the implicit association test. These are tests you can take online. Here. The implicit association test, the IAT, is a controversial assessment intended to detect subconscious associations between mental representations of objects, concepts, and memory. Its best-known application is the assessment of implicit stereotypes held by test subjects, such as associations between particular racial categories and stereotypes about those groups. Okay? What's the issue here? I mean, it can't, immediately fix those issues, but I don't think there are any psychiatric tests that can immediately determine anything as vague as implicit bias. I assume he just doesn't like it. Let me see the controversy section. Criticism and controversy. engendered some controversy in scientific literature and the public sphere. It has been interpreted as assessing familiarity, perceptual salience, asymmetries, or mere cultural knowledge, irrespective of personal endorsement of that knowledge. That can be a part of implicit bias. A more recent critique argued there is a lack of empirical research justifying the diagnostic statements that are given to the lay public. For instance, feedback may report that someone has a minimal, slight, moderate, strong, automatic preference for European Americans / African Americans, though critics contest the degree to which such conclusions could be drawn from IAT. There isn't even that much consistency in the same person's scores if the test is taken again, according to one article in the New York Times. I guess I just don't see the issue of people taking the test. I don't know. Look at IIT. Two of the original designers of that test have said as much publicly. The third, Professor Mazarine Benaji, I don't think that it claims to objectively diagnose implicit bias. It's just a way of trying to, like, determine it. Remains recalcitrant. Much of this can be attributed to her overly... Oh, I really like this, by the way. So two of the original designers of the test have acknowledged that it cannot objectively prove implicit bias. And the third person remains recalcitrant. Much of this can be attributed to her overtly leftist political agenda. I love that, dude. So when people agree with Jordan Peterson, it's because they're logical, they're rational, because they have the facts straight. When people disagree with Jordan Peterson, it's because they're true believers, because they're recalcitrant, because they're politically biased. Look, I don't care anymore. Listen, okay? Jordan Peterson is a clown, and I would make him cry if I talked to him. He seems to cry pretty easily. I don't think it'd be difficult. If you like Jordan Peterson, honestly, like, please do not make your inability to take care of your own life my problem, okay? Really sorry if you need a daddy figure, okay? I'll tell you to clean your room. You don't need him, okay? I'm really sorry if Jordan Peterson was your first exposure to the basic idea that discipline can be like a good avenue for self-improvement. I really hoped you would have learned that from your parents. But again, your poor parentage is not my problem. I don't care. Jordan Peterson is a moron. Every time I see him open his mouth, he is utterly incapable of talking about the issue, and I'm including psychiatry. I actually legitimately think that if I read up enough on psychiatry, I could probably laugh him out on some of these issues. Because when he talks about anything remotely related to the human psyche, it seems like he's either borrowing from like very basic platitudes that you could learn from a self-help book, or when he gets into the more abstract stuff that he has to pull like, you know, sort of more esoteric like theory into, it ranges from morally objectionable to like provably wrong to like get like weird like projected fanfic, you know? Yeah, and there does seem to be some evidence, like kind of circumstantial, I guess, that like he isn't a particularly good professor and that he wasn't a particularly good therapist, like that he's kind of a pseudoscientist. Keep in mind, dude, Jordan Peterson was just a regular professor. There was nothing exceptional about Jordan Peterson before he got famous lying about C16. He's not distinguished because he was some kind of famous, well-known psychiatric expert who was cited all over the world. He became famous for political reasons by lying about trans people, okay? When people treat Jordan Peterson like some kind of revelatory, you know, like expert, the dude's not Chomsky, okay? Like he was just a random professor, okay? I've been to university. There were people there who had PhDs who I bet I'm smarter than, okay? It's not magic, all right? He's just a remarkably unimpressive person, I think. And now he's leaving so he can have more time being a political demagogue and less time faking any kind of like academic knowledge. And in his resignation letter, at least from the parts that I can bother to read because I don't care that much, he is demonstrating all of the tendencies of a pseudo-intellectual and a racist. These complaints are very reflective of long-standing racially charged complaints that essentially boil down to progressives are ruining America by like allowing black people to stand on even footing, you know, or I guess Canada in his case because he's not an American. He nearly lost his clinical license for ignoring his clients to go on his book tour. Yeah. Oh God, remember his debate with Slavoj Žižek where he read the Communist Manifesto to argue against. Oh my God. Slavoj should have just like put him in a headlock and given him a noogie. Honestly. What a ridiculous... That's insane, man. this was like a massively publicized debate between two purported intellectuals. You have Slavoj Žižek, who actually is an intellectual, who's known around the world for his academic writings, for all the books that he's written, you know. And then you have Jordan Peterson, who got famous about lying about Bill C-16, and then he wrote self-help books that are mostly nonsense. And he came in there having read the Communist Manifesto, which was a pamphlet which was put out there to exacerbate the class tensions of the working class in Europe, you know, not an actual foundational text on communist theory. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Jesus Christ. The only reason I ever pretend to give Jordan Peterson any credence is because, like, the slight chance that conservatives who watch my channel or who stumble across my videos on him won't immediately click away. But I can't do it, guys. I can't. He's a clown. I'm sorry. You're not going to get me on this.